The upper left, he's playing for Vitality in the blue. His name, of course, is Maru.
I don't know if we have the effect intro for him, so I'm just going to say it. In the bottom right, we have the red Zerg player. He is SHIN.
Recently signed to Gaming Gladiators, by the way. One of this absolute feeding frenzy of teams picking players up in the last couple months. Gaming Gladiators, Talons, Dark, Vitality probably making the biggest splash, picking up pretty much the entirety of Onside's A team. If you want to be fair, if that's fair to say, Solar, Maru, picking up Ryung, all that. We have
some
Navi.
Pretty good players there. You know, some pretty good, you could say.
Just they're okay. You know, Nate, I think we're gonna have to see more from them before we factor them into the GOAT discussion. Like, you know,
yeah,
7 GSLs are good, but
do we really know how good Maru is in Texas, though? You know, have we done ourselves a disservice by not sequestering every single stat specifically to games played in Texas before this tournament? I wonder sometimes, Bayo.
You know, we're memeing.
I do.
But that actually is a really good question. Maru traditionally has done very well domestically, incredibly well. 7 GSLs. I mean, sure, you know, one can make an argument about.
That's his whole story, right?
Yeah,
more or less.
But his international results, and he's gotten better at it over the years, but his international results have never really stood up to those domestic results. So we're in Texas. It was a rough journey for a lot of players getting in with the storms, flight delays, everything else. How good is Maru going to look on day one? Because again, it is an international tournament. This is international Maru.
Yeah, that's always a question that we ask. And when these conversations about longevity and all-time success are brought into play, it's not an unusual trend, I think, that a player would do better in their home turf, right? Especially anybody that has experience going to these events, even if you've been to one as a fan. It can, hey, sleeping in a different bed before you got to do something important can always be a tough thing. Of course, we've got a decade plus experience on most of our players in this tournament now at doing stuff like that, so you don't expect it to factor in as much. But for Maru, that's really the only thing people hold against him, is that even though he has been so dominant in Korea for the majority of his career, he has not come in and just swept the floor with the non-Korean events. And for his credit, not having the same results outside the region as inside his home region, for him that means, well, yeah, he mostly just gets top 4, so he doesn't win those events that he goes to, but you'll still see him, he'll lose to some guy that's really good, but it's not going to happen until that final round. You know, it's not like, oh, he just completely chokes. It's just that when he gets to face against other players on their home turf, like, you know, we'll see with Sarah later, it becomes a whole different beast.
Look, Nate, I'm trying to build some cope here, okay? I'm trying to make the fans believe that SHIN has more than like a snowflake's chance in Dallas to win the game, okay?
That's fair.
This is caster cope. Let me spin the story. Like,
no,
tell me that Maru's like playing at 50%
Let's look
power.
at the upside. Let's look on the bright side here for SHIN. We do start on site delta, which if there's any advantage beyond maybe you don't want to get caught with a bad fight at the rocks or some of those choke points in the middle, you've got some space that you can work with. You've got some pathways you can take around the outside on either direction. Once that third base comes into play, it can kind of open things up a little bit. We see he's done a good job of getting himself a bit of vision towards the front, but what I think we were getting out of Maru's build is him showing actually a good amount of respect for him. He's not rushed into any sort of surprise tactics. He's getting a lot of Marines. Whether he goes for a push here, this could be an absolutely difficult thing to stop, but it's not nothing secret. So for SHIN, he's getting all the queens together. He does have a lot of overlords in production as he has hit a supply cap. He's getting his evolution chambers, taking another gas. He's only got 13 Zerglings. And this is the thing, Maru can do something that looks about as straightforward macro 3cc as possible. No tech, no upgrades, so to speak, to really support this marine attack. Stim is almost done, but he's just here putting pressure on you anyway. And that's a level of confidence that's rare to see. A Terran just moving out completely unupgraded Marines halfway across the map against a top level Zerg player. That's just something you only do if you're Maru.
Yeah, you know, at the end of the day, Maru, he does go for that, right? Go second, third barracks before he gets to starport. 3cc before the second barracks. Like, just very
greedy, but at the same time, he's like, I'm not scared. I'm not like hiding in my base, making bunkers. I am just going to play point and deal with whatever you throw my way, because on some level there's an assumption that the Zerg player is either getting all their supply together to go for a big swell for an attack, or they're making drones and getting upgrades, in which case, as the Terran player, you don't want to be sitting back defensively if the Zerg is just eating the map. So you can see Maru trying to get himself into a good spot now that he has the medevacs. The Marines are immediately applying pressure. There's a full stim to clean up the creep tumors by the northeast expansion, and that is going to pull SHIN's forces back over. But as far as maps go, Site Delta, you have a lot of space, so maybe this is where some of those more open field surround situations can end up working in his favor. Of things to avoid, of course, getting hit by mines and chokes, or tanks for that matter.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting as well. I want to go back to what you're talking about. Oh, Site Delta, maybe it's a little bit more wide open. SHIN maybe not get steamrolled by Maru early on. It's really interesting because Site Delta was a map that every Zerg was, in the last map pool, that every Zerg was banning. It was the Terran map. Like, okay, we're gonna get rid of it.
Now it's one of the least choky maps.
Yes,
somehow.
Now it's the one that the Zergs are like, okay, well, you know, at least I get to play this because everything else is even worse.
It's not like 60% of the map is blocked off from the start, like Crimson Court. So you can play the game here. That's true.
But yeah, for now, SHIN, despite Maru with this kind of macro, greedy, aggressive opening, again, quick 3 racks before getting the factory, quick 3 CC before that, lots of bio, lots of money, maybe slightly lower attack. You didn't get a lot done with it. Certainly SHIN had to build a couple more lings, but for now, as this repair is gonna knock down, there we go. We're all good. But the first round of stuff out of Maru really hasn't accomplished a ton. SHIN has his Hydras on the way soon. Hydra Den's done. 2-2's well timed. The thing that you got to be worried about right now that Maru is hitting about 15 seconds or so before Baneling speed is done. And that's always the timing where we see Banelings get targeted down. Maru can put a lot of pressure on top of this 4th base. So now the question, does SHIN try to hold on to it? Does he give it up, expand somewhere else? And for now, the answer is, yeah, he wants to hold on to this. He wants to buy that time.
Yeah, it's as you said, it's an extremely important timing. He doesn't have the creep spread pushing too far west of this base. So while he would love to get the snipe on that, picking up the Marines and just using the tanks to give himself that landing zone outside is going to make defending this so much more difficult. SHIN is starting to get some lings set up on the north. It's what he needs to do. He needs to go for a dive on this. Can't just bleed out to it forever. And Maru's got another army coming up towards the front, but this is a pretty ridiculous amount of Banelings. However, they're now off creep. There's the splits that we expect from Maru. That's textbook Korean Terran gameplay right there. Absolutely does a beautiful job of fanning out. And that south base, I don't know how he's going to be able to stop it now. He could dump all of his transfuse energy into it, but still not going to be enough. Those Banelings are just so crucial, Bayo.
Yeah, there are 3 Banelings on the map right now. SHIN went for the full break. If it doesn't work out, you really lose out a lot of time. Now there are more Banelings on the map. He's going to try to clean this up, but again, as you point out, it's just not enough. The splits are far too good. The damage, the target fire, far too good. Now these Marines are pretty low. Got to be careful about that one, but SHIN just gets rolled over. Game 1,
so
Maru.
Many medevacs.
Yeah.
How about that though? You see a 0. I'm not gonna say that the implication here isn't that Maru has no flare, but this build is a 0 flare build out of Maru. He goes for a ridiculously fast. His 3rd command center, I saw some people in chat asking, started in game at 2:15. That was the 3rd CC. So he goes Reaper, command center, then gets the reactor in the 2nd and 3rd barracks. So we're talking from Maru, you can't really get greedier than that. And yet he's still so aggressive and in SHIN's face and more or less breaks him with his first move out that has anything other than just a couple of Marines.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting as well. So you talk about that 2:15 3rd CC. It's also immediately afterwards followed by 2 racks. So it's that 3 racks, 3 CC play that does slow down your tech a little bit. So your factory is delayed, your starport's delayed, your medevac's delayed, but it does put a lot of pressure on. And even if it's one of those things where, because you have the 3rd base behind it, even if you don't go, right? Even if you don't go and take a ton of damage, kill off a bunch of queens, maybe get a base, you still are building a big army that's going to be useful later on. You've still forced stuff out of your opponent. And as long as you play defensively up until about like 6 minutes, maybe until your 1-1's done, you're kind of fine. It is punishable, certainly. We can see players get greedy behind it and try to punish it that way. Let me know that the referee that we're ready to go. You can go and kind of try to bust it down before it properly gets going. There are ways to handle it, and I don't expect to see it in every map in this series, but it's a great way to establish tempo in this series, right? We talked about this last series. Oliveira it's aggressive map 1 and kind of progressively drip feeds aggressive looks while being less and less aggressive as the series goes on. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Maru do the same. Like, look, hey Shin, I've done this thing. Now you have to be careful about it, which means I can kind of maybe even get a little, it's hard to say greedier off of 3cc, but I can get maybe a little bit more, more like traditionally greedy, right? So 3cc 111, getting my tech a little bit faster and then going into things.
Yeah, at first I thought he was being overly respectful by not trying to kill him super fast. Then I realized that his build was so macro that it was actually once again back to being disrespectful. There was clearly not a fear of getting hit with anything that was going to shut that down. He's like, all right, Shin is going to respect me too much to try and bust me because he knows it won't work. So let's just go to unimaginable levels of greed and find out if he continues that way in game 2.
That we will, because game 2 is here. Alcyone is the map. And in the upper right, looking to find some answer to take his 12th map ever against his opponents. It's SHIN.
And his opponent spawning in the bottom left. He is building his wall at the natural. He is the blue Terran, Maru.
Man,
oh, look at that cheeky second barracks Bayo, right up. He's right up on them gold minerals.
Yeah, I was about to say, Nate, I'm of two minds about this build. 2 racks in the wall, it was very good. If you're done, still very good. But we haven't seen it as much. It feels like it's mostly been solved. But that's not what we're seeing. Maru, 2nd racks on the map here, which means that 2nd Reaper, right? Because I think this barracks is a little bit, yeah, this is the 2nd racks. It's going to arrive just a little bit faster, so it's a minor wrinkle. It's not that big of a difference, but it is something that if SHIN, he thinks, first, 2nd, 2 racks in the wall, whatever it is, whatever he scouts is just going to be slightly wrong. And, the break we talked about, hey, maybe Maru, he can play a little bit more standardly greedy, something like that. Well, you can also go the opposite, and Maru is the king of 2 racks, so we shouldn't be surprised.
No, that if there's anything that Maru is known for, it is his aggressive play, even though he is one of the strongest and has been for many years now one of the strongest macro players there are. But that's pretty normal when we see players come onto the scene. Usually it's like some kind of flashy build, or they do something that makes a bit of a splash. Other players give them recognition for it. They kind of get into that system. You start practicing with those people, playing with those people, helps you get up to their level, and you kind of just see them grow. Maru, I think he was basically the Korean equivalent of Clem for some time, a long time ago, when he was too young to play in their tournaments, or people were like, okay, well, we're excited for him to get to the point where he's able to compete at the top level, and he was known as more aggressive. But it's something he still keeps in his play, and that's one of the reasons why people fear him so much. But you can't just say, oh, if I just play defensively or macro, I'll be fine, because then Maru will do what he did last game, have 3 command centers by 3 minutes, and then, well, it's just never gonna be a good time.
Yeah, and again, we've been talking about it a little bit, but it is worth continuing to talk about, in that Maru owns SHIN. There is no, SHIN is a very good player. SHIN has been making waves, doing really good in the GSL, really solid. Took down Sarah like Katowice 2 years ago, making deep runs in a bunch of different tournaments. For whatever reason, Maru owns him. So in that context of, he pulled a wool over SHIN's eyes. He got away with that 3cc 3 racks playing game 1. He's throwing a slightly different wrinkle here. There is so much just questions that are generally going on in SHIN's head about how to play the game, that just doing something like this is a little bit harder. That being said, this handling of this 2 racks Reaper type of play, the way SHIN has handled it, he's lost some links, he lost a single drone, but he trapped every single Reaper in the main base, and that means that's actually one of, granted, Maru made a lot of mistakes by diving that deep, but that is a really nice cleanup.
Yeah, that's, you think about the trade-offs of this. He does end up losing somewhere in the realm of, right, the 4 Reapers to about 11 Zerglings, and then there was that 1 Marine that ended up trickling out over there. So he gets about his first wave of drones after this is held. So now he's up to about 36 to 27. The 3rd command center is almost done, but still going to need about a half a minute to turn into an orbital. So I think I like what you're saying here for SHIN. He does come out in a pretty salvageable position. Having to give up so much larva to the Reapers is never fun, but since he proxied it and that 3rd was delayed, it's a pretty strong investment out of Maru. His factory has the reactor, but we don't see We don't see that starport. He's just going back into another pretty greedy follow-up, to be honest. He's already got the 1-1 researching for the bio, so he's expecting to maybe take a bit of map control with these Hellions and just to get everything else situated in the meantime. Probably try to go for that third once he gets his Marine count back up to that 12 to 16 mark like last game.
Yeah, I think the other important thing to point out is when you go for the 4 Reapers like Maru did, so really anything more than 3, you're trying to put pressure on that 4th base. It's like the archetypical play. Obviously, Maru didn't go for it, but like generally the result of that is, okay, I've got the 3rd base canceled. I put the Zerg in a really uncomfortable position, so kind of anything less than that is a disappointment. And now Shin's active on the map. And these might be defensive roaches. We're going to have to see, but for now, he built a couple overlords going into this. He's building more roaches here. He's pushing his creep pretty aggressively into the center of the map. And I wouldn't be surprised to see him not go all in. 7 drones are on the way, certainly. But I wouldn't be surprised to see him try to put pressure on, because, you know, one of the downsides of going for this build, Nate, your add-ons are exposed on the right side of them. On the right side, they're pushable by roaches. Damage can get done, and yes, there's a bunker on the way, but this stim gets canceled.
This is the downside to the greed, because he misses the read that this is going into roaches. He's like, okay, my opponent's gonna probably try and macro up on this. Maybe he realizes that he didn't get quite enough done with those Reapers, but having the roaches to follow this up so quickly, he's in the awkward spot of he's gonna have 1-1 in his armory before he even has stim started, question mark. He floated the barracks, the second one that he made, down the ramp to use that reactor. So can he defend this? Yes, but at a great cost. And most importantly for Shin is he resets the time. He punts the ball very far to, since we're in Texas, I'll use more American language, Bayo. He kicks the ball very far away for Maru to be able to try and make a big play. So it's gonna slow things down here quite substantially.
I mean, I do like actually what we saw Maru do there. It's like, okay, look, he took damage. Not necessarily economic damage, not necessarily army supply damage. Yeah, it's 107 to 68, and actually a lot of that, I was gonna say a lot of that, it's roaches, but actually no, 25 of that supply, 23 of that supply is in workers. That actually is pretty significant. But Maru, he did keep the Cyclones alive. He did move forward and remove some more roaches from the map. That's always gonna be really nice, but I adore what Shin's doing now. It's like, look, I put pressure on. Maru's not gonna have stim for the... Maru's gonna have like 2-2 and stim finishing up, or combat shields and 2-2 finishing up right around the same time, which is just not something we see all that often. And Shin realizes...
It's my favorite thing about this is that ridiculous timing on the 2-2.
It's gonna be a really powerful timing though, but Shin realizes like the world's his oyster. So what do? You build roaches? Sure, fine, keep yourself safe. Infestation bit down as quick as possible, going into hive as quickly as possible. And then you just hit him with a bunch of ultras probably, and you know, Maru's not... This is how Cyril beat Maru at what was it, at Masters Coliseum about a year ago at this point. Just you get that quick hive, you leapfrog the Terran tech, and yeah, look, 2-2 bio against a bunch of +5 armor ultras. They don't touch them.
That's a rough time. Again, if anything though, just based on how fast he's trying to do it, it's worth keeping in mind that +1 Carapace is only going to be done for maybe 30 seconds before +2 attack is ready for Maru's bio. So we talk about what the tipping points typically are, and if he can get up to that 150, 160-ish supply, then great. Then you can see really start to trade with the bio. But yeah, he got slowed down on his infrastructure, actually running into a pretty big supply block here. He's got a couple depots in production. I think we just had a drop down. So he's getting things moving again. But yeah, it's all about getting that army supply to where he needs it to be. But for Shin, he's bought himself a lot of breathing room. He can get everything to where it needs to be. And I think, as you mentioned, a focus on getting to that composition, getting those upgrades, and extending this game to that point. That's what everything is going to be about for him. But again, then maybe we see Maru do the super late game thing that he does, and God knows what happens to this game if we head in that direction.
Well, you know what? I'm excited, Nate. I'm ready to just sit down, strap in. You promised me a 40-minute game. I'm okay with that one. Certainly if this is an incredible Maru comeback, because he's really gonna need it at this point. And he's gonna need to survive this timing. As dropping the main base, sure, that's a thing. That's one way that Maru can try to come back. And I love, by the way, how active he's been with this double cyclone drop. It's not something we generally see, but you got to use the tools that you got. So for now, well, I want to say, what was that? Yeah, there we go. Ultra Cavern is going to get canceled. And we talk about these timings. You get +5 ultras very quickly, at least +4, right, with +2 and Carapace and everything. anything you can do to shut that down is nice, although losing a medevac, losing a bunch of Marines, maybe not exactly how you want to do it.
Yeah, and it's a very awkward situation, like you mentioned, for the Ultralisk Cavern getting denied, but because he still has adrenal glands and the Vipers, his ability to now take away this drop play, even though he doesn't have anti-air, becomes very, very nice for Shin. This should give him the most breathing room. If he pulls that into the Queens, if he pulls it into Sports, whatever it ends up being, he has options to get rid of it if it becomes a problem for him. And then, of course, Blinding Cloud from the Vipers on the siege tanks, on the bio. He gets him to run forward through it into the veins. That could be devastating. So the tools have been laid out for Shin. He is maxed, so maybe we see him set up for some other transition or get ready to re-max, maybe save up a little bit of money before push. But Bayo, I like what I'm seeing. And you talk about the army moving through the very center. It always looks so awkward on this map, but that's another reason why we say we like it for the Terran boys, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of straight up broken for the Terran. With the line of sight blocker, you stick a tank there and like, good luck breaking that down.
You just put a mine. Yeah, you put your Reaper on hold position. Nothing can even see through it from the other side. It's good times. It's good times.
If you're a Maru fan, you want to say, hey, you know, Shin's in this great spot. How does Maru come back? He's doing everything that he needs to do to come back into this game. That ultra timing we talked about, it's not going to be as powerful as it was. Yeah, Snipe got nerfed a little bit, but Maru does already have Snipe on, or it does have Ghost on the way. He's getting into that one. He's building more command centers. He's holding the high ground here, and this is one of the reasons that Alcyone, in my mind, and by the way, we see Terrans do this more and more. This double Viking play, just zone out Vipers as much as they can, is so nice. Only one Blinding Cloud goes down. Now, the base died, but that was so many Banelings, and Maru on the Rejoinder is going to kill off even more. Yeah, the Planetary is dead, but Maru, at 150 supply, was already building like 4 more command centers. So it's painful, absolutely, Nate. But, you know, that fight is starting to be this thing where it is a lot less cost effective for Shin to do what he wants to do than for Maru. And as Maru tries to grind this game out later and later, that's the type of game that Maru is just going to want to play. 5-6 fights in a row, trade 2,000 resources better, and bleed Shin off the map.
It's a very awkward fight to look at because I still think head-to-head, there's a lot of risk in taking the full-on, potentially game-ending fight, since a lot of upgrades are still in motion. We have that +3 attack coming in soon for Maru for whatever reason. I don't think that armor upgrade got started or was queued up behind it, so he's a little bit behind there. But the Ling's trying to go in with only +1. You're like, okay, it's got to be about the Banelings, the Biles, get the base, get out, continue to draw the game out, expand, spread the creep in both directions. And so far, he's done a decent job holding back this triple drop on the right side. He's got a double drop on the left that is going to be able to clip quite a few of the Zerglings, though. And it's just the downside of not having Corruptors, really, because either your Vipers are there to parasitic bomb, and either that kills them or it doesn't, but you don't have anything that's chasing these down.
Yeah, and oh, Bile, I mean, I think the medevac was dead anyways to the bomb, but Bile lands, and now this is what we're talking about. This ultra timing is going to try to find something here, but it's not really much of anything. Banelings are going to get canceled, taken down. At what point do you say it's scary for Shin, right? We talk about, oh, yes, sure, taking this straight-up fight. Maru would love to get +3. I think he was just gas-starved when he was trying to take it earlier. But is it 5-base Maru? Is it 6-base Maru? Is it when Maru's taking away 1 base from Shin? At what point do you go from, hey, this is still pretty good for Shin, to, oh, it's a Maru game, and he's not dead yet. And
when he gets these 2 bases, when he gets these 2 bases he's going for right now, securing the outer expansions is always going to be the tricky part because the ghosts don't stim. So either you're trying to shuffle them around and juggle in medevacs, which is really tough, or you're just moving between the most vulnerable points. It looks like the Vipers overextended a smidge there, but not quite able to get them. Now he lifts up the command center. He doesn't want to lose the base, but denying the extra gas geysers so that Maru can't start dumping money into stuff like nukes. That's really important. He's trying to get Liberators to help deal with this as well, but that's the advantage of how Shin is playing. Because he has just so much of this ground force and he's willing to throw so much into him, he's saying, if I deny this economy from you, then you're never going to be able to get to that point where you can build the unbreakable wall, where you get this wall of planetary fortresses that we know Maru is a big fan of. And truthfully, that's your only supply-free anti-ground static defense for Terran. So while it is also a base, if the Terran can slam down 20 of those bad boys everywhere, it is very hard to break them with a full army and the backing of planetaries. So this southern base is going to get cleaned up, but most of the ghosts actually were left cloaked there, so their energy isn't really in play. But I think once he gets the Liberators zoning out and he feels comfortable enough to send a few ghosts out for nukes or something without being pushed, then I think Shin's life becomes a nightmare. Because right now he doesn't have to chase any red dots. So if he can win the game or lose the game before that happens, he can save himself a lot of stress.
Yeah, it's also really interesting to point out here, or I guess important to point out, Shin goes in for that attack. It was more cost effective than the previous one was, but still Maru trading pretty significantly better at this point. But importantly, his Vipers died. And Vipers, it's more than just you got to rebuild them, right? You got to get energy back on them. And that does slow down your kind of reset timing as you build your units. You want to go in with these successive waves. It gives Maru time to get himself set up better, to have this position with Liberators and tanks and ghosts behind him. His tanks are so staggered that even as the first couple are going to, I mean, these are really good parasitic or blinding clouds, and the tanks aren't really going to be able to fire. This base may go down, but at this point, we're starting to look at the situation. I mean, look at the supply drop for Shin. Yeah, he got a base, but we are very rapidly, Nate, finding ourselves in a world where this is so far from cost effective that he's got to find a different option.
Yeah, there's a couple of things about this that I find really interesting on the part of Shin. I like a lot of what he's doing for maybe odd reasons. Normally, the Zerg player, you throw away a lot of expensive units, things like Corruptors or Broodlords are getting traded, but because it has been so much of the Ling, and obviously Banelings aren't cheap, but that's really the most expensive thing that he's more or less throwing away. A Viper or two, couple Ultras, but he hasn't taken the gas geysers on a lot of the expansions that he's had for a while, like that top left one, the bottom right one. He's got the ability to keep a pretty even composition throughout the game and puts himself less at risk of that typical thing that can happen to a Zerg that tries to end it with the tech, gets shut down once or twice, and then you've got 4,000 minerals and no gas, right? And all of a sudden you're like, well, I can't just make Lings and kill them. So I like that Shin's exercised some degree of patience, and he's forcing out so many tanks to try and give himself the opportunity that those Broodlords are just going to be too hard to deal with. So even though he lost a lot, I mean, his bank is still nice, but we've seen about half that bank go into the rematch. So this next fight, I think, starts to become, he really can't afford to take quite as bad of a trade again.
Yeah, and you talk about Corruptors, Broodlords. Broodlords, Nate, they can be a solid tank busting unit. Absolutely. Broodlords are so much worse than they used to be. The Broodlings, once they're on the ground, might as well tickle. They do very, very little. They're sure a little bit faster, fine, but yeah, no, Ultras they're a timing unit now. You kind of hit with them once, and then the Terran has the option, and it just doesn't really feel nearly as good. So I appreciate the idea, but on a map like Alcyone, where no one particular fight generally is going to end the game, moving into that just doesn't feel all that great. Now losing a Corruptor, I mean, yeah, these Vikings don't have a lot of upgrades, certainly not, but even still, damage getting done. Vipers think about dropping a parasitic bomb, but these ghosts here, no, you do not get close to this. They are going to get shot down. So Maru, his
and this choke is impossible too. Look at the little space Shin has to reposition. There's nowhere to flank this position at all without going completely to the east side of the map, and that gives him plenty of time to retreat. And now Maru positions himself to cover that angle, and we start to see the advantage here for Terran. All the bases are on the high ground, the places to fight are on the low ground, and that space in between, there's just not a lot of ways to get in there. So even this alley the Ultras would have to push through to try to get to him. This is where the ghosts become, well, they become the Giga Chad monstrosities that we know them to be.
Yeah, now Maru finally moving on the map the first time in decades, feels like. I mean, we're 18 minutes in, and he hasn't been on the other side of the map in 12 of those minutes, right? Not until
it's been a hot minute. It's been a little bit, huh?
But his first move out gets 2 bases, knocks down a lot of stuff, and Shin, he tries to flow around the map like water, but I mean, Maru, none of those bases were done, so we can just cancel. It's like, yeah, that's fine. I got bottom right side. I got kind of good position to pressure, and I got the gold base. Would I love the north side? Absolutely. Do I have to take that for a while? Not really. So this is classic Maru late game things. You give him an inch, he's gonna take a furlong, a parsec. I don't know of a sufficiently long unit of distance to make that work, but somewhere he goes quite a ways.
Yeah, I don't know what we'd have to look into what the Texas cattle rancher terms would be for such a joke, but we'll have our first little mini engagement in a bit here. He lands one fungal onto some of the ghosts. This is where the Broodlords become annoying. He had so much on the ground. He needed to get the Liberators. He needed to get a lot of these siege tanks. So this is what gives the Broodlords some of that value. But you're right. Like the Broodlings themselves, their ability to be annoying past the first shot has been severely limited. So Broodlords are not quite the GG unit days gone by. And another reason for that too is if we look at this composition, it's not like he wants to have a lot of corruptors. He still needs that ground supply to deal with the ghosts and keep them from just walking up like this. And I mean, that's just, yeah, one of the best sound effects in the game, right?
I think the important thing to point out as well as we look at this push, the other reason why we talk about Broodlords not being all that great, you need, as you talked about nukes, this is the most effective. Yes, we can all dream of a bunch of Broodlords going down, but this is the most effective, right? Clearing out all this static defense, making it much harder for SHIN to establish forward aggressive positions, but he's going to be okay for now. The other thing is that while Thors are, and have been for a while, incredibly strong, just in general, certainly once they get their upgrades, but against Broodlords in particular, and this buff or this change to the Broodlords made that even more true. So Maru's gonna get up to like six Thors maybe. What does he have right now? He's got 3. He's gonna build up a couple more, and then again it's gonna make it harder and harder for these Broodlords to really do what they would want to do. But for now, the siege is looking pretty good. He has knocked down half the HP of the planetary.
The only thing that was hurting that planetary was the tanks from the Broodlords causing the friendly fire. I'm like, oh, those Broodlings are hardly nibbling, but here we are. And at least, you know, we talk about things from this whole course of the game. We've mentioned upgrades a million times. SHIN is at the point where his ground units have all of those upgrades too. So we're seeing more or less the full might of each other's forces, except for in the skies. Still the early days of the air upgrades, but Maru, as you pointed out, he's going to use these nukes to zone as well as try to buy that space and try to bait him into a position where he can either land those snipes or pull the army into the nuke zone. But you know, the worst case scenario is he at least is pushing maybe an inch of the creep back there with that. But he's preventing SHIN from being able to go across. And I guess long term, it's probably worth mentioning that SHIN did take Maru's purple gas base. He took his rich Vespine geyser. He's taken about 300-ish gas from it as he finally finds it. But just feels like it's worth generally mentioning. If the game goes long enough, having one extra base that your opponent never gets, that's a pretty big deal. Maru tried to take the bottom right base. He was blocked by an uprooted spore crawler. So that's life. That's right there, man.
Most important thing, and tries to land, but banelings are there, so then I guess that's not really going to work. And Maru actually by rotating north side, he says, look, okay, my gold base, I've mined out a decent amount of it. It's not going to die super quickly, but it will die. Whatever, I can pull SCVs away. But if I can trade that for like 3 bases, which is what he's doing right now, and you know, sure, some of these bases are more mined out than others, but even then it's production, it's larva, it makes it harder for SHIN to remax. And I think the most important thing you point out, Nate, the gas count is really bad for SHIN. Technically he's mining it, but not really. So he doesn't, 4,000 minerals, 3,200 minerals, it's an alluring number. 40 gas, 300 gas is not enough to rebuild an army on. So Maru trades 1 base for 3, and that is exactly the type of thing that he needs to be doing in this game. Yeah, you'd like to keep the gold base alive, but in the balance of things, the damage that he just did, it's incomparable.
Well, that's what we were talking about, was he had saved a lot of those geysers earlier, and as he's making that tech switch, the only upside it gives him now is that when he rebuilds some of these bases that don't have a lot of minerals, there will still be some Vespine for him to go for, but his other bases have all mined out that he was originally taking, so he really needed that extra base or two. And this is where that cost efficiency of the Terran army is just a nightmare, because these are units that should not really die, or if there is a trade, you don't expect more than maybe half of any of them to go down, maybe a Thor or 2, maybe a couple of ghosts, but the Terran is going to focus on retaining those units. So how do you burn through the 5k 3k bank? Well, you're gonna need I'm gonna say it, just a big juicy fungal on the ghosts and a little bit of luck maybe at this point.
Have you considered a spore battery to kill an orbital? Is that something that is on? It's not gonna. But if only. What do you think?
I don't think I've ever seen a spore crawler off creep kill a command center flying over to retake that base. So I don't think I've ever seen it.
No, not really. Did some damage though, but I mean, the spores are going to try to burrow here, just soak as much damage as possible, zone the Vikings out. That is something. But the scariest thing for the Broodlords is these ghosts, is these Thors on the bottom side. And you talk about fungals, and they're okay. What we need to see is some Neurals or something to really knock this down. But the Broodlords are starting to knock down the Thors. The Thors are going down. Maru, this is an expensive fight for him, but now there's no detection. And the Ghosts are just going to start to knock every single... That's a big fungal, though. There we go. Can you chain that one together? Looks like the answer is no. They're going to have to split away, but there are no medevacs to save them. So
that pullback.
Oh, man.
I really thought he had a chance to get all the Ghosts there. But this, as we've talked about, is he retaking those bases? Yes. So he's just started to mine some of those geysers again, and we see him able to spend a little bit more of his money as a result. But it's just he's making lings and banelings. He's not feeling quite as wealthy as he once was. And even though a lot of those ghosts still did die and a lot of the Thors did die, he managed to retain about half of them. So he's got a good amount of units still available. He still has 14 ghosts, 4 Thors, and he's still above 180 supply. SHIN getting back to 200, it's gonna be a journey. He's got a mountain to climb.
And I love Maru as well. It's like, yeah, okay, I have these Vikings. Oh, by the way, pointing out a change. These are +3 Blue Flame Hellbats. A patch ago, all those lings would be dead. Now they're not. They survive. Thank you very much. Hey, there we go.
Breaks my heart. Okay, you can't say we only ever got buffs, okay?
Well, I would argue that you didn't get, well, you know, we got buffs and nerfs, but the map pool though, the map pool is that's something else.
Hey man, I look forward to when the next season we have the whole map accessible at the start again too. So I'm with you there.
Anyways, Banelings on the north side, they will knock things down. They're doing a nice job of, really the most important thing here, shutting down the rich gas base. But the problem is again, SHIN was mining off of 4 gas. You had these 2 bases on the, or these 2 gas on the bottom left, bottom right side, a couple more gas on the north side. So he's on 2 gas income right now, and his bank is totally gone. It's absolutely, it's not there. Maru, you talked about, he's maxed out. So SHIN has to win multiple fights to win this game, and I'm not convinced that he can even win.
Yeah, when you get put into a situation where you just have to have corruptors that are not actually killing anything of importance, they're just there to defend and zone for the Broodlords, and you don't have any splash on the ground. Yeah, it's